Hi everyone, it's Stephanie here and welcome back to the My Favorite Things YouTube channel. In today's video we're going to change it up a bit and we're going to create a scrapbook layout. Now I have not scrapbooked in years. It used to be all that I did. I did not even make cards when I first started paper crafting. And then I kind of transitioned out of it and started to just create cards. I just found some pictures the other day and thought it would be really fun to pull some different dies and stamps and create a layout. So if you like to scrapbook, then you'll definitely get some ideas and tips on how to use dies and stamps in this video. And if it's not really for you, then you can also incorporate some of these ideas into card making. So to start off, what I'm going to do is show you how I do my journaling. Now, I don't have a large format printer, and I typically scrapbook in 12 by 12. So what I'm doing is I'm just printing my journaling onto a standard piece of typewriter paper, and then I position my pattern paper over top of that and adhere it on with tape. And then I run it through my printer a second time and let it print onto that pattern paper. I love the Off the Grid paper pack from My Favorite Things to do journaling because it has some really great papers with grid patterns and lines, and it just works nicely for type journaling. So I did that, ran it through my printer, had that all kind of removed. You can see I was able to easily pull that tape off and didn't even rip the paper, and now I kind of have everything in front of me. So I am zoomed out quite a bit than I normally am just because I'm working on a 12 by 12 scrapbook layout, so I wanted to try and get as much of it into the frame as I could. So what I'm going to do now is work on the sentiment. So I'm going to be using the stitched alphabet dies to create my sentiment. And if you know me, you know I love to die cut from cardstock that has ink applied to it versus cardstock that's a solid color, just because I really like the texture and dimension you get from that inking on the cardstock. So I just used some Hickory Smoke Distress ink, added some gray color to this panel, and now I'm just picking out the different letters that I'm going to need, and I'm going to run this through my die cut machine. So as the video goes, you're just going to kind of see me jump around and work on different pieces to add to the layout. I just kind of wanted to show you how I use different supplies to create different components on a scrapbook layout. So the first thing we're going to do is create some pattern paper that we're going to add to the background on the layout. So I have a piece of insulation pink cardstock and I have some pink ink here, and what I'm doing is just taking a stencil, which is the large polka dots, and I'm also taking my clarity brush and I'm running it through that ink, and then I'm just kind of swiping it over the stencil. And I like using these clarity brushes when I don't want really dark pigmented color. I find that it gives a nice soft look, and I just like how quickly and easily it is to add the ink to the surface. So I added it to the first side, and then I just positioned the stencil onto the second side, and I'm adding ink once again. And the great part about this is that you can line up the stencil so that the circle overlaps the original side that you were already doing, and then it allows you to seamlessly create that pattern right across that piece of cardstock. So now I have the first piece here. It's going to fit perfectly within that white cardstock piece. Now for the gray and white that I have in the background, these are just two regular old pieces of cardstock that I've had in my stash forever. I just used those so I had a base to work on, but everything else that we're going to create within that is going to be created with MFT cardstock, inks, and stamps. So when I'm working on a layout, especially one like this where I'm creating all of the different pieces myself, I like to kind of just position everything onto the layout, make sure it's working, the sizing is good, and then I just kind of put everything aside and go to the next component. So for this, I'm going to create a piece of pattern paper that we're going to run across the center of the layout. So I've taken the Exquisite Ocean stamp set, and I'm using some different stamps in this set. I'm using a couple of the different leaves, and then I'm also using one of the fish, and I'm stamping those with various colors of green ink. So I have Limelight and Sour Apple for the green, I have Summer Splash for the aqua, and then I have, I think, Cotton Candy is the pink color. So I just started at one end, and I'm just kind of working my way down this strip of white cardstock, and I'm stamping all of these images until I have this completely filled up. I want this to look like a piece of pattern paper that I've cut down into a strip, and I want all of the colors to match everything that we're doing on the layout. So ahead of time, before I started working on the layout, I kind of pulled different ink colors that match nicely to the photos that we're going to add to the layout. So when I do this, I just kind of move the stamps around, I kind of twist them and turn them and get them to a position where I know it's going to fill up the space and I'm going to have some really nice stamped images. Now I want to add a little bit of dot detail in between all of these images. So what I did is I just grabbed the Ocean Fun stamp set and grabbed one of the little dots that's meant to be one of the eyes on one of the critters, and I'm just using that with cement gray ink, and I'm just adding some dots all in between these flowers and leaves. This just kind of helps to tie in some of that gray color, and it fills up some of the white space where we weren't able to get the stamps super close together. So now I have this really pretty strip of pattern paper that we've created simply by stamping a bunch of different images with stamp and ink. And if you don't, like I mentioned earlier, Scrapbook, this is a great way to create a background on a card as well. So now I'm just kind of doing the same thing once again. I'm pulling everything back to the front here, positioning everything back onto the paper, making sure that I like the colors and how everything's kind of lining up. And then I'm going to move on to the next component. So for this one, we're going to create another piece of pattern paper that was intentionally supposed to be on the bottom of the layout. But once I finished this one here, I decided to switch it up and put the pink on the bottom and the blue on the top, since it kind of looked like sky to me, and I just felt like the blue should be up on the top area. So I'm doing the exact same technique I did with the pink. I have the cascading scallop stencil. I believe that's the name of it. I will have all the supplies linked in the video description below. And what I'm doing is just taking the clarity brush once again with some snow cone ink, I believe I'm using this time, and I'm adding that to the snow cone cardstock. Now when I layered my two stencils, I ended up with a pretty harsh line in the center. So what I'm doing is just positioning that stencil over top in the middle and running that clarity brush over top just to kind of even out that ink. And then once I have that done, once again, I pull everything in front of me, I position all the pieces back on here, make sure that I like how everything's kind of lining up, and then I will move on once again to the next component. Now I wanted to have a piece of scallop cardstock tucked kind of underneath this pattern paper, and since our dies aren't 12 inches long or whatever size your layout might be, I need to do some creative die cutting so that I can make this longer than it would be if I just cut it straight out as it is. So I'm positioning this die onto a piece of grout gray cardstock, and this is a scallop die from one of the Blueprints die sets. And when I run it through the die cut machine, I'm not going to cut out the one end. So I'm going to make sure I kind of have it off of my cutting plate so the end doesn't cut. And you can see there that I have the scallop cut there, but I didn't cut the end off. I'm going to position the scallop directly over top once again, and I'm going to run it through my die cut machine, and it's going to allow me to cut out a strip much longer than I would have been able to with just the die in its own. So now I need to create a few elements that we can add to the card. So I want to have some leaves and a couple of the different fish, and I want to use all of the same colors. I'm not changing any of the colors. I'm not adding any new ones. I want to keep everything completely uniform and make sure it's going to match really well. So I stamped a bunch of the different leaves, and I'm also stamping some of the fish. And the fish are also from the Exquisite Ocean stamp set, and they actually layer. So I have the pink on the bottom, and then I use the cement gray on the top. And then I'm adding a little bit of detail to this cardstock panel with the framework stamp. This is a background stamp, and I've just stamped that on there with some cement gray ink. And we're going to cut some circles out of that. So you'll see those a little bit later as I start to adhere everything together. So now I kind of have all the components finished. I did a little bit of die cutting off camera. I have some clouds there from the Stitch Cloud Die-namics. I have a little tab from one of the blueprints, and I found a few different buttons in my stash. I don't really use buttons all that often anymore, but I do have a few that I've saved over time. So I pulled some that kind of match in color, and I'm going to incorporate those as well. So now we're just going to grab all the different elements and put our layout together. So I have this part of the video pretty sped up just because there's a lot kind of going on, and I wanted to include the entire process of me putting this all together. So I have different components that I've cut out. A lot of these are from different Blueprints die sets. Those are great die sets if you like to add little elements to cards or scrapbook layouts. There's banners, there's tabs, there's arrows, there's all kinds of fun little dies kind of hidden within those Blueprints Die-namics. So just kind of look at all your dies, and you may discover some that will work in different ways that you didn't think. So I've just cut out a bunch of these different pieces. I've added a few sentiment stamps to some of the banners that I've cut. I've layered the different elements that I stamped with the leaves and the fish onto those little circles that I mentioned I cut out from the background that we stamped with the framework background stamp. And then I'm just kind of layering and adding all the pieces. So I'm adding the sentiment with some liquid adhesive, and these are the letters that we had die cut from the stitched alphabet dies. And then I'm positioning the rest of these elements onto this other circle that we've created. I've cut it into a half circle so that we can tuck it nicely into the center area of the layout. And then I have some of those stitch clouds that I've die cut, and I'm layering those over some of the photographs and in behind some of those elements that we've created. Once I have that done, I'm just going to adhere this entire inner portion to the gray background. And then I'm going to finish off the layout by adding a few buttons. These are just from my stash. I've had them for years. And I just wanted to add a couple on here just to add a little bit of dimension. And then that is going to finish our scrapbook layout. So everything in the middle area of this scrapbook page is completely created with my favorite things, stamps and dies. So definitely look at your products differently. If you are a scrapbooker, there are so many great ways that you can use all of your supplies to create elements that are completely unique and all your own. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will definitely be back with another scrapbook layout soon. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.